My name is Britton LaTulip. I am the president of Blue Manners Online Academy in the Art of Raising Children for Greatness series. We're doing school, education, we did character, and now we did power. I'm not going to tell you about those too much tonight. Easter is coming up, the Easter celebration. As always, there are people who are claiming that Easter is pagan. For a long time, I thought, well, maybe these holidays are pagan. Not just this one, but Christmas. And this happened probably in my 20s or something. I don't know if it was like a crisis of faith or something like that, but I was like, wait, what? What are you talking about? And then, I don't think I stopped necessarily believing in it, but I did question it. It just seems like a slam dunk that Easter is based off this goddess Ishtar and all that stuff, and you can get sucked into that, and you can start to question your faith and the history of your church and the holidays. And so I wanted to address that because this is not the first holiday that they've attacked. All of the Christian holidays and all of the Christian heroes and all of the Christian traditions are under attack constantly. Christmas is being called pagan. Easter is pagan. Halloween, which is the eve of All Saints' Day, is pagan, being called pagan. It has been paganized, by the way. We'll talk about that in a second. They have paganized it, but it wasn't originally pagan, okay? It was All Saints' Day. You celebrated heroes of the church. Okay, Christmas, it was just a celebration of the coming of Christ. What could be more joyous? What could deserve celebration more for a Christian? It's probably the most exciting time, except for maybe the resurrection. I don't know which one is more exciting. The resurrection's bittersweet, I think, a little bit, because Christ had to die right above that. So it's like, so it's not quite as joyous as the baby in the manger and the final, the coming of the Messiah, but these were always Christian holidays, and they're under attack. Columbus is being called a genocidal maniac. Columbus did great things for Christendom. Without Christopher Columbus, we wouldn't have finished the Great Commission. Okay? He discovered a whole new world, and we brought the gospel to it. It's a very good thing, but he's been called a genocidal maniac, and there's a war on that. The Crusades, one of Christendom's finest hours. And yes, there were mistakes. There were bad things that happen in every war, but it was one of Christendom's finest hour. When I was in school, I learned that the Crusades were horrible, and it was about Christians trying to spread the faith with the sword. Like they just went over there like to these poor Muslims, like, you will believe or we'll kill you. And that was the image I had of the bloodthirsty Crusades. It's almost the exact opposite. The Crusades were kicked off because Christians were being slaughtered by Muslims. Their territory, the Byzantine Christendom, was being taken over by these Muslims, and they were being slaughtered and enslaved. And so Christians in the West said, let's go east and protect our brothers and sisters in Christ. That's what the Crusades was about. But again, our history is constantly being twisted and perverted and slandered. And it's no different with Easter. And I'd go far as to say, just remember, they're doing the same thing with Jesus. There was a video a while ago. What was it? Oh, I just went blank. Oh boy, I forget. But basically saying that Jesus is a derivative of a bunch of pagan gods, that the Christians just took all these other kind of pagan gods and traditions, like the worship of Sol Invictus and Mithra, and combined them. And that's really what Christianity is about. It's like a sun god worship or something like that. So they're claiming even Jesus is pagan. Okay, so it makes sense that they would attack Easter too. Why not? It's on the list of Christian holidays and Christian things. Okay. So is Christian Easter, where did this idea come from? Well, for the most part, it came from the idea that Easter is just a word for Ishtar, or that the word Easter was derived from Ishtar. I hope you know who Ishtar is. Ishtar is the most popular god of the New World Order. It's Lady Liberty. It's the star god. It is the Liberty was the Roman name for it, but she's also Ishtar, Astarte, and she has other names. This is the god that Solomon started to worship. I believe she was the wife of Baal, I believe. I could be wrong. But I'm not wrong that Solomon, when he strayed from worshiping God or Yahweh, he started to worship Ishtar and Baal and actually brought their worship into the temple. So that's who this is, and people are claiming that really Easter is really meant to worship her, and they get that from the name. Well, two things. Even if that was true, even if the word Easter was derived from Ishtar, which I think that there's very little evidence that there is, there's some evidence. Okay, there was a saint who made that claim, like I think in like 750 AD, but it's been debunked by the church many times. But even if it was true, Never was Easter for Christians about celebrating Ishtar. So even if the name has some sort of similarity to Ishtar, never was it about celebrating Ishtar. It was always celebrating Jesus, which is not a pagan thing to do. And then, so the other thing is a lot of times these guys will paganize the celebration, and then they'll point to their own paganization of the celebration as evidence that it's pagan. And they've done the same thing with Easter. So with Christmas, for example, you see this. They introduced the celebration of Santa Claus. So they introduced the celebration of Santa Claus in the early, let's say, 1900s. Okay, so they introduce it, and then 50 years later, they go back to the Christians and say, "Look, you're celebrating Santa Claus, which is really Saint Nicholas, which is really like the devil, and therefore it's pagan." Okay, you might be able to make that argument, but Santa Claus is not part of the Christian celebration, the feast day celebrating the coming of Christ. You can trace Christianity's version of Christmas all the way back through the centuries, and it was never about Santa Claus. So the pagans, the capitalists who introduced it in the 1900s, they introduced it and associated it with Christmas, okay, not the church. So if you want to argue, get rid of Santa. We don't need Santa. Santa never had to be a part of Christmas. We don't celebrate Santa in our house, but we can celebrate the birth of Christ, and that's what the holiday was originally about anyway. It's the same thing with the Easter Bunny. They're trying to say, look, it's pagan, it's about fertility, and then they point to the Easter Bunny. Yeah, but the Easter Bunny isn't associated with the celebration of Easter historically. You introduced that. I believe the Dutch started introducing that, and the Dutch were, I would say that they were like one of the first really pagan states in Europe. It was so bad that the Pilgrims, the Puritans, when they fled England and the Church of England who was persecuting them, they went over to Holland, the land of the Dutch, and it was so bad over there, it was so pagan that they're like, yeah, I think we need to go back to England and face that persecution because our children will be led into this pagan environment. So it's pretty bad there. And those are the people who had started associating the Easter Bunny with the celebration of Easter and kind of overshadowing that celebration, right? But not the church. And so if you want to get rid of the Easter Bunny, fine. But that's fine. We don't do the Easter Bunny. But that you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Okay? So you can throw out that pagan celebration of the Easter Bunny, sure. But you should celebrate the resurrection of Christ, the death and resurrection of Christ. It's the most pivotal event in history. Everything was leading up to it. The other problem with saying that Easter is pagan because it's derivative of Ishtar, the word, is that Easter is only called Easter in the English-speaking world. Okay? The celebration of the resurrection of Christ didn't originate in the English-speaking world. Okay? So they may have called it that, but it actually comes from the Passover, and it comes from the Greek word for Passover. And they don't call it Easter, like in Russia or in the Byzantine areas or the old Roman Christendom. They don't call it Easter. Okay, it's just a Passover. It's just a word for Passover. Paschal. It's a Paschal feast. Paschal. And of course, Jesus was the Paschal lamb, the Passover lamb. And so that's why we celebrate it on that day. Okay? All right. Now, it's really important. I'm thrown a little bit off tonight. Right before I got on, I did make some comments about Prager University, and it upset some people. And so I want to just address that just in a second. And I think it's tied into this, what I'm trying to talk about. The problem is so many Christians are taking, and I mean this in the nicest way. I'm not trying to attack anybody, and I think it's great that we go out and we read opposing viewpoints and we glean a bunch of information in different places. I do it. I read everything. Half of my library would scandalize you because it's books that are totally opposed to my worldview. I have like this big, like The Second Sex by Simon de Beauvoir. It's like it's like the Bible of feminism. Okay, it's the total opposite worldview that I come from. I have Mein Kampf. I have the Communist Manifesto. Okay, so I believe in reading all of that stuff. But the problem is, it's not just that Christians are exposing themselves to other worldviews. They're being pulled into this. They're watching YouTube and somebody gets on there who knows very little about the history of the church. They're just regurgitating something that they've seen from another YouTube video, and then they're claiming that this Christian holiday, this ancient Christian well-established holiday is pagan, and they regurgitate that. And then people like us, maybe we don't have a lot of information, we don't know the background, we don't know the history, and we see that and it frightens us. Well, we don't want to be pagan, we don't want to be sucked into that, so I'm not going to celebrate Easter anymore. I'm not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. I'm not going to celebrate Christopher Columbus Day. I'm going to condemn some of these other ones. I don't celebrate Halloween, for example. And it's because it's been so paganized. The enemy, I feel like the enemies have had that one. And I've had to reinstitute it and say, you know what? No, it was originally a Christian holiday, so we'll celebrate the saints. I'm not going to go out there dressed up as a rated R horror movie, but we'll talk about the saints in our home or something on that day. I'm not going to give up our Christian holidays just because they've been paganized. Okay, so I just want to say beware of YouTube. Not everybody on YouTube who is a Christian scholar and knows what they're talking about. They might mean really well. They might really believe that Christmas is an ancient pagan celebration of Sol Invictus Day or something like that. They might truly believe that. But that's what the church is there for, to protect us from these heresies. And the church has been celebrating Christmas since basically the beginning. We can take it all the way back, I believe, to the 1st or 2nd century. They didn't always celebrate it on the same day throughout the church, but they've always had a feast day to celebrate the coming of Christ, okay? Last week I talked about the Egyptian obelisk in the Vatican City. It is a scandalous. So I watch stuff. I watch this stuff too. And there was a guy in there, he probably means well, and he was, actually I don't think he means well. I think he's probably an atheist actually. But he probably still meant well, okay? And he was talking about insinuating that there's this, in Vatican City, which was the heart of Christendom for a long time. There was the Byzantine, Constantinople. After that fell, it kind of moved to Rome for a long time. Then after the Reformation, it dispersed, and England was, anyway, it's a long story, church history. But in Vatican City, there's this obelisk, and he talks about how obelisk is an object of pagan worship, and it comes from Egypt, and it celebrates these Roman gods, these false gods. And then he insinuates, he says, so why is it in Vatican City? Insinuating that somehow it's pagan, or that the Catholics must have put it there because they're secretly pagan or something like that. And if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't know the history, it is scandalous. Wait, why is that pagan thing sitting in Vatican City? It does seem like a scandal, okay? But again, you have to, first of all, I would say trust the church, trust church history, okay? And then do some research. Why is there an obelisk in Vatican City? Well, it is pagan. It was not brought there by the Christians. It was brought there by a Roman. And he actually took it from pagan Egypt. It was Caligula, one of the worst emperors ever, the most satanic, evil emperors, if history is true. And he brings it over there. And Nero has it in his circus. So it is definitely pagan. It's definitely a symbol of our enemies, the Christian enemies. Okay, so why is it in Vatican City? Okay, right outside of St. Peter's Basilica. It does look insidious, right? Well, legend has it, or church history has it, that St. Peter was martyred there. He was martyred. And the last thing he probably saw was this obelisk, a symbol of Egyptian paganism, which Moses was brought out of. God brought those people out, the chosen people out of that. So it touches all the way back to Egyptian paganism. And then it's brought over to Rome, and it represents Roman imperial paganism and the triumph, right? It's a symbol of triumph. It's right over where St. Peter's crucified, upside down, in the Roman circus by Nero. Okay? So why is it there? Well, it's an amazing story. Because eventually, after Peter's crucified there, his blood is in the soil, and it seems like there's the triumph of the pagan over Christendom. You fast forward a few hundred years, and Christendom, Rome, converts to Christianity. And a Roman emperor, Constantine, gives the land of the circus where St. Peter was martyred. He gives it to the Christian church. It's just like Egypt, where the Egyptians, God had the Egyptians pillaged by the Israelites. Not that they came in with swords and took it, but the Egyptians are like, just take it. They give it to the Israelites when they flee, right? When they go out into the desert. Well, now Rome, the emperor of Rome, has converted to Christianity, and he's like, here, take this land. And so the Christian church built St. Peter's Basilica, this amazing church, on the circus where St. Peter was crucified. It's an amazing story. And then this obelisk, instead of tearing it down, they said, hey, it represents the triumph of Christianity. They put a cross on top. Okay? So it's an amazing story. Now, you could say it's inappropriate. The church should have gotten rid of it because it's still a pagan symbol. But for us, it's a symbol of the triumph. You see what I'm saying? Nero thought he had triumphed over Christendom, and now there's a cross on that. We won. We conquered. Christ overcame. So it's an amazing story. That's why it's there. But it's insinuated like, oh, they're putting up these pagan symbols because they're secretly evil and pagan. And you can think that there are pagan traditions in the Roman Catholic Church. You could argue that. But you can't argue it from the obelisk. Or if you are going to argue it, at least know the history. And maybe you say, well, they should have torn it down. And you can insinuate that. But at least know what you're talking about. I hope that makes sense. Okay. I'll have to read the comments later and respond to them, or I kind of lose my way. Oh, it's cutting out here, just FYI. I'm sorry. I might not be able to do these lives very much anymore with this. It's a nicer camera and stuff. For some reason, they do cut out a bit. Where does the bunny come in? Okay, yeah, the bunny came in, like I said. I don't know if you heard this earlier, Will, but the bunny came in, I believe, from the Dutch. They introduced it, and the Dutch was already being paganized, okay? The Dutch was heavily Jewish, and the most radical Protestants. Like I said, the Pilgrims, the Puritans, they fled persecution in England. When the Anglican Church was persecuting them, they fled over to Holland because it was freedom and the land of freedom. They could worship their faith openly. And they're like, dude, it's so bad over here. Our own children would be seduced. It did this like paganism. And so they went back to England and then were arrested and then eventually fled to the New World. So that's the story. I mean, it was a very pagan thing and they did introduce it. But that's just a small little subculture of Christendom that introduced the Easter Bunny. It's not part of the original celebration. It never was. And I'm all for removing the Easter Bunny if you want. I don't know that the church requires it because there's nothing inherently pagan about that. Even with the Easter Bunny, we're not tying it to the worship of any sort of god or painting Easter eggs. There's nothing really wrong with that unless you associated it with pagan worship. But if you do feel that's pagan and you don't feel good about it in your conscience, then remove the Easter Bunny and still celebrate the resurrection of Christ. Okay, so what I was saying is be careful with what you're watching on YouTube. There are all these videos and they're breaking it down for you and they're telling you all these scandals and stuff and they're nonsense. Look at what happened during the election with Trump. There were people I knew who were getting this inside information from the deep state through YouTube as if it's a big secret and only their channel knows it. And they were talking about how the Chinese had a secret army underground and there was like some earthquake, but it was actually a bomb and it was blowing them up. And they've been saying that Trump was going to come back in the summer and it was all part of his plan. And the lights went out in Vatican City after the election. And they're like, this is all part of Trump's plan to take down the pedophile rings and stuff and all of this stuff. And none of it was true. It was all just being fed. Like the Pope is still there. And Trump didn't assume power, and it's not all part of his grand plan. He's being indicted now, and he's running again, which is great, but none of it was true, okay? So just be really careful. There's a lot of misinformation on both sides. And at any rate, the other thing I'd say is beware of celebrity Christians. There are people, somebody like Amy Grant, who I love Amy Grant. I grew up on her music. She's a beautiful singer. She's not a scholar. And the problem is somebody like, or Kanye West. Kanye West converts to Christianity. He's a celebrity. He now has a bigger Christian platform than I would. Okay? And everybody wants to know what he thinks. And suddenly, all of a sudden, he's like a leader in the Christian movement. But he's been a Christian for 5 minutes. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Amy Grant is famous for her singing. She's not a church elder. She's not in any sort of teaching authority position. But people look to her because she has a beautiful voice. The fact that she has a beautiful voice doesn't make her a scholar who should be teaching and leading. And now I believe she officiated or at least had like a gay wedding for her niece or something like that. Look me up. I don't want to slander anybody. I believe that happened on her property. And this has happened to a lot of celebrity singers now. They've gone over to kind of the woke LGBTQ side, or they've lost their faith, and people held them up as church leaders. You have people like Hillsong, beautiful music. Not necessarily someone that we should be looking to teach us doctrine. Being a really talented singer doesn't make you a great scholar or an expert in exegesis or the Bible, if that makes sense. So be very, very careful. I feel like a lot of people are being led astray by these people. There was another guy. What's his name, Janine? I forget. I always forget his name. He was Jewish and he played in some movies. Like, I think he was in Transformers or something. Oh, I'm like, my mind is fried today. It's been a long, hard day. Janine knows I woke up at 3 a.m. What's that guy's name? He's famous. But anyway, he converted to Christianity, which was like a super shock because this guy was really bad. He's like really secular, really liberal, like hatred of the church, and he converts to Christianity. Shia LaBeouf or something, right? And he converts to Christianity. It's an amazing story. I do want to hear his testimony. It's really cool. But I don't necessarily want him teaching doctrine. He's been a Christian for 5 minutes. Why would he be teaching Christian doctrine? Why would we care about that? He should quietly and humbly get in line and start learning from the church, not leading the church. Amy Grant should sing her heart out because she's a beautiful singer, but she should submit to the authority of the church and the teachings of the church. Okay, she's not a leader of the church. She's a celebrity. Same with Kanye. I'm sorry if I'm breaking up, guys. I don't know if I'll do these very much anymore. I can see even right now that I'm like breaking up really bad. Can you guys still hear me? I apologize. Okay. All right. So what do you do? How do you discover the truth? Do you go onto YouTube and you do your research and you listen to the latest commentator? Even these scholars on YouTube who have big channels, and some of them are really good. Why do they have big channels? Because they're popular and they made a YouTube thing and it's given them a platform. But there are great scholars in the church, maybe that you haven't even heard of, because they're not on YouTube. Most people don't go on YouTube. I think I've written some great books. But, oh boy. I'm sorry, guys. I know I'm freezing a lot. I really am sorry. I think I've written some great books, but I don't have a great following because I'm not on YouTube. I'm not out there promoting myself. Some people have huge platforms to promote and tons of money to promote. And so they become like the celebrity voice of Christendom. But it's dangerous. They don't necessarily know what they're talking about, if that makes sense. Another thing, and this kind of came up earlier as I warned about Prager University. A lot of you guys are conservatives. You love Prager University. You love the Daily Wire. I understand that. They're more popular, certainly, than me. He's certainly got a bigger audience. He's a better speaker than me. I understand that. And I do want to warn you, though. There's been the rise of Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is probably not a Christian. And if he is, he's a baby in his faith. He's a baby. He is a clinical psychologist. And psychology has been at odds with the Christendom for a long time. But he's a clinical psychologist, and he brings that to the table. And it's interesting. I love to hear him talk. I study him as an orator and a debater because he is very talented. But he's now teaching on the Bible as if he's some sort of Bible scholar. And if you look at his I've read some of his books, and I know his perspective. He had, his 12 rules for life or something. I forget. I only read half of it. But his perspective of the Bible is basically it's a grand metaphor. It teaches truth through like fables, and everything is some archetypal story. That is heresy according to the Christian church and tradition. So I am interested in his perspective and understanding it, but I want to warn Christians. He's not a Christian leader or Christian teacher. I don't even think he's converted yet. So why are we looking to him for guidance? It's different than hearing his opinion and looking for guidance. And that's what I'm trying to warn people on. I'm not saying people can't listen to it or find it interesting. I'm just warning people. I personally know people who now are following Jordan Peterson and believe that the Bible is just some archetypal story and it's like a fable of representing truth. And he did some debate with Sam Harris, and he seemed to stump Sam Harris. And the Christians were like, yes, and it was so awesome to see a conservative kind of Christian type defending the Bible so well. But how did he defend the Bible? Did he defend it by saying it's the absolute truth of God? It's the word of God? No. He essentially said it represents truths. And it's truths put to story so that it's easier for us to understand. And it's pushing for the same worldview as you, a better society, but it's through story. And that seemed to thwart Sam Peterson because now Peterson was basically making the same argument, that it's basically like an Aesop's fable or something. Okay, not quite that. I'm probably oversimplifying it. I should write out my notes or something. I don't want to be accused of slandering anybody, but that's what I got from it. So this is not a teacher of the church. We have lots of teachers of the church. Jordan Peterson isn't one. He's interesting, but he was yesterday's liberal. Okay? He was yesterday's atheist. And he's a huge proponent of evolution. That's where his worldview comes from. And he's a feminist. Like I said, he was yesterday's liberal. Okay? He just gained a celebrity status. So everybody's looking to him. And he's being held up by the Daily Wire. And like I said, he's very talented. I would love to be an orator like him. I think he's a deep thinker. I love to analyze his arguments. Very good. But he doesn't have a lot to teach me about the Bible. Okay? I look to the church in the actual Bible, in the church's traditions, to know my faith, not a psychologist who has a totally different worldview and doesn't believe in the gospel. Okay. Or divinity of Christ or any of that stuff. I don't believe he does, okay? I don't believe he does. I could be totally wrong. And I know he's softening on that, and I hope he finds his faith. I think he's searching. I think it's awesome. And we want to teach him. We want to bring him into the faith. He shouldn't be leading us, if that makes sense. Okay. And there's a difference between listening to someone and being led by them. Okay. I'm all for listening to him. I think he's great. And PragerU. Okay, I went off on PragerU. Okay, I know you guys love Dennis Prager. I know you guys love Ben Shapiro. My only point is if we're Christians, Dennis Prager is not a Christian. He often speaks against the Christian world nicely. He's nice. He's not like super antagonistic. He doesn't hate Christians like some of the other people. And I love to hear his perspective on modern Judaism. I think it's important for people to hear it. I think it's important for people because I think most Christians think that modern Jews have a very similar worldview. I think most Christians are shocked when they hear that Israel, I didn't even know this for most of my life. Like, it's illegal to share the gospel in Israel. To minors. I believe it's to minors. And they were trying to, thankfully, Netanyahu stepped in and said, no, he's not going to support that. And he likes the Christians because the evangelical Christians have been very supportive of Israel. But there were people who were in Israel who were trying to ban Christianity. They'll put you in prison for preaching the gospel over there, okay? The modern Jewish worldview is today very hostile to Christianity, like Hollywood. Hollywood is run by Jewish people, and many of their movies are very hostile to the Christian worldview, okay? That doesn't mean we hate them. It's just a reality. It doesn't line up. They persecuted the church since the beginning, okay? And again, I'm not saying that we should hate them. We should love them, but we shouldn't be letting them guide us. And there's been this push to like rediscover our Jewish roots. And we look to Jewish people who are outside of the church to teach us our Christian faith as if we're somehow illegitimate. You know, we're just Gentiles, but we're not. Our church was founded by the Messiah, the ultimate Jew. Christianity is the true Jewish faith, okay? Because the Messiah founded our church. 12 Jewish disciples founded our church. We don't necessarily need, I don't want to say pagan, but I would say modern Judaism to instruct the Christian church as if they have some sort of deeper truth. They have strayed far from their faith. Okay? You look at Israel, I think it's the number one spot. I believe that, I don't want to say it without looking it up because I don't want to be accused of slander, but I do believe it has the highest percentage of atheists, Israel. Okay? They're extremely pagan, and they've been pagan for a long time. They've left the church, many Jews. It's horrible. We want to witness to them. We want to bring them that into the church. We don't want them instructing us. And a lot of the heresies and the false teachings that have been brought into the church can be tied to, well, I'm not even going to get into that tonight. I'm not going to get into it. But I'm just saying that we should look to the church. And how do you do that? Well, you can read the Bible. That's one. That helps. It's not perfect because you have people that twist the different translations and interpret all these different ways. But you can read the Bible. I highly recommend you read the church fathers. Go back to the early church fathers. There are church fathers who were literally knew the apostles, were trained by the apostles. Like Timothy, for example. Now, he didn't write, but there are other ones who did. They were first generation church leaders, church fathers, and they have a lot of writings. Go back and see what they thought. Okay, that's a great way to learn. And look to the doctrines of the church that they've established. And I would do that. So I hope that makes sense, guys. Do not lose faith. Do not turn your back on the Christian holidays and the Christian heroes. They're all under attack, not to purify our faith, but to destroy it. Okay, this is coming from the enemy who wants to destroy the Christian faith. Yeah, you know, somebody's a good actor, so now they are the spokesman for Christendom. It was never supposed to be that way. We were supposed to have church elders. We were supposed to have church leaders, and they defined the doctrine, and they led and fed and discipled the church. Now, you go out there and you play in some Hollywood movie, And now you have such a huge following that you are like the de facto like spokesperson. Everybody looks to you, and the actual leaders of the church are being ignored, and a lot of people are being led astray. So, empty. You can feel. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. All right, guys. Well, I hope I haven't offended any of you. I really feel bad. I think I have offended some people. I know some of you guys really like Prager University. I guess I was upset with Prager University I have for a long time because I watch their content. And I don't always know. So sometimes it's like, oh, that's really good. But occasionally I actually know the historical event or thing that they're talking about. And then I'm like, that's propaganda. They're so bad. There's no way that they don't know better. Okay, so sometimes they get away with it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's fascinating. But sometimes I know. And then it shocks me how far off they are and how they mislead people. Okay, so that's why maybe I came across a little bit harsh. I'm sure Prager means well, but he's certainly not come from a Christian worldview. He comes from a capitalist worldview. And capitalism is not Christendom, and capitalism has been the enemy of Christendom for a long time. And that shocks people because they think, well, you're going to promote socialism? No, no. At some point, I'll try to lay this out. I think I've done it before. But look at George Soros. He's a supreme capitalist, and he also happens to be a socialist, doesn't he? He promotes socialism, okay? They are the same. Well, it's like two heads to the same snake, okay? It's the same movement. The capitalists were the socialists. The capitalists funded the communist revolutions, okay? So Prager, what bothers me about Prager, one of the things is that he promotes capitalism as like the salvation of America. Like, it's not Christ, it's not Christendom, it is capitalism and a free market system. And if everybody would just embrace it, everything would work itself out and there'd be an abundance of everything, okay? And that's not historically true. Like, if you look at South America, it's not because they embraced socialism. Okay, it's because socialism was pushed on them by the capitalists who came and overthrew their countries and then bought all of the resources up. And they're like, you look at Haiti, and we'll look at Haiti and like, oh, look at that it's like a hellhole and it's like a third world country, and we'll mock that. Why don't they just embrace American capitalism? American capitalism owns Haiti. Okay, the Rothschild bankers bought that state up. The Freemasons went to Haiti. They staged a slave rebellion to free the slaves, right? And then the bankers swooped in and said, hey, it's a long story. I'll do another talk on that, okay? But they do this everywhere. They did the same thing in Russia. American capitalists, bankers, I know them. I'll write them down. It's in my last book. I'm telling you. They funded the communist revolution, capitalists. They overthrew Russia. Then they send somebody in like Lenin or Trotsky, that monster, in, and they steal everybody's resources. They steal everybody's resources. So the state owns everything. And then who owns the state? Well, the state turns to the bankers. In fact, right after Lenin took over, he immediately turned to the bankers like, hey, we need the London and American bankers to fund our revolution or it won't succeed. And then what happens? The entire economy is working for the capitalist bankers. That's the way it is in America with the Federal Reserve Bank. Every penny goes back to them, makes its way back to them. We get some of it to live with and invest and take out mortgages and loans and stuff, but it all works its way back to the bank. Through inflation, okay? So they've been the great enemy of the poor people. They haven't lifted a lot of us up. If they look at all these success stories in these big companies, you're starting to see that they're all owned by the same cabal, okay? So do I believe in capitalism? To an extent, some of the principles and some of the principles of socialism. I think that there can be some I don't want to say socialism, it's such a bad word. I believe in Christendom. I believe in charity. I don't mind having some sort of retirement for older people if it wasn't bankrupt and corrupted, right? I also like free market. But do I think that capitalists should be allowed to found the porn capital of the world in Fernando Valley and ship porn all over the world and pollute all the countries? Do I think that capitalists should, like George Soros, should be able to go with his money and fund revolutions and overthrow other countries? Like, he's now God, he's king of all these countries, okay? So they talk out of both sides of their face, okay? Capitalism will not save America. Christ will, and the church will. That's my opinion. I think we need to turn back to Christ, not capitalism. Okay? And then the other thing, like the Civil War, I mean, Prager University did one on the talk on the Civil War, and it was just pure propaganda. I'm going to break it down. I just couldn't believe it. They even have the guy, he's dressed up in his colonel uniform, like an argument from authority, like and then they just say things that are just blatantly not true, or such a twist. Like they'll take, let me give you an example of why I don't like PragerU, okay? So I was just talking about this on Fake History, and I'm talking about the Civil War in a video that they did on the Civil War. And he was so dishonest. Like he was talking about how it's all about slavery, okay? And he pulls this quote out about slavery, and he just gives you that quote. And he says, see, it's the only reason, the fundamental reason. But if you find the quote, and that's what you have to do. You have to do research. You find the quote in the speech. You find that the speech is this long. And the very last thing he says, he's like, last but not least, we need to talk about slavery, which means all these other issues were brought up before slavery, talking about the secession. There were a whole bunch of issues at stake, and I'll talk about that. But he pretends, he ignores all of those, and then pretends like it was just about slavery and it's a slam dunk. It was just like so much dishonesty in some of the Prager talks. I couldn't believe his one on Napoleon. It really offended me too. How Napoleon, a lot of people think Napoleon was just like Hitler and he was this horrible genocidal maniac, but actually he was really good. And I just couldn't believe it. I was like, are you serious? Have you studied history? Yeah, he waged genocide. It was like the First World War. He went into all of the countries, slaughtered the French people, absolutely annihilated them. And he was funded by bankers, by the way, the same bankers, the same capitalist bankers that many in the conservative movement like. Okay? And so, yeah, I've been offended by Prager for a long time. His comments on pornography, I'm sorry. I just, to say that it's not that big of a deal, I think it's really destructive. I think it was the gateway drug. It's just devastated families, not only in America, but around the world. And I appreciate his opinion. I appreciate him being honest. But I just want to be careful to remind people that he's not a Christian. He is a modern Jew. And they are outside of the church at this point. They have rejected their Messiah. The true Jewish faith that came down from Abraham is now the church, if the Messiah is correct, which means these people are outside of the church and they lack the guidance, I believe, of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And they're still interesting to listen to. And I'm sure Dennis Prager's a nice guy. It just worries me that so many Christians are following him, not just listening to him, but following him, following his teachings, taking it. So again, I probably just offended people more by trying to explain. I don't want to offend anybody here. I like all of you. Some of you guys have been following me for a long time. I'm not trying to attack your heroes. And PragerU does put out some good content. I like to watch their debates. They make some great arguments. They make me think about the merits. I mean, there are some merits to a capitalist system if it actually worked. So I'm not trying to say that there's not. I'm just saying that that's not the solution to our problems. The problem is in the heart. It's in capitalists creating like addicting products. Like they put sugar into children's cereal, not because it's healthy for the children, but because it's super addicting. It'll make the children crave the product. Or they put pornography now in every show because they know how highly addicting it is, and you're more likely to watch their show. That's an evil capitalist force. You can't have just a free market system like that. It's destructive to society. And look what it's done. Look at where America is today. Okay, we've been capitalist for a long time. It hasn't saved us. And I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm done. I hope I didn't offend anybody tonight. I hope you guys do celebrate Easter and enjoy it, and all the Christian holidays, and continue to study the Christian heroes, and continue to do true research, which means go back to the original sources. Like if somebody wants to talk about the Civil War, that's fine. Hear them out. But fact check them. Go back to the original sources. Just saying stuff on YouTube doesn't make it true. Like go back and read the speeches. You have to take the time to get to the truth. It's so important. And that's what we try to do at Blue Man Academy. I don't know what the Civil War is about. I was taught it was just about slavery my whole life. Okay? And then I heard these crazy people saying, oh, it was this other stuff. And then I'd watch these YouTube videos that just debunked it. And then I'd go watch the other videos and they'd say, it's not debunked. What about this? And I said, you know what I should do? It's just epiphany. I said, they have to be getting their material from somewhere. What did Lincoln say when he addressed Congress? His first speech to Congress, what did he say about the Civil War? What did the secession speeches say? And I'll tell you, they did talk about slavery quite a bit in the secession speeches, but they talked about a lot of other things. And I shouldn't do that talk tonight. I'll save that for another night. But or like the church. What is the obelisk? Why is it in Vatican City? Go do research. Don't just take it for gospel because some atheist on YouTube said so. Like you have to do research. All right, guys. Have a good night.